No intro music. No intro music today.
Whoa. No intro music?
No intro music. We getting right into it.
Okay.
This is a lot of spicy shit going on. And, I texted you a couple days ago. All I said was emergency podcast. You said, let's do it. And here we are. The reason why, we kind of are doing this emergency podcast is because 2025 has popped off, man. It's, it feels like there's just like so much just like popping off, a lot of news stories, a lot of crazy, insane, unimaginable things happening. But I'll name a few. I'll say real quick that oftentimes in life, man, we have these moments, or I guess it's been pretty much like throughout the entire Trump sort of phenomenon. We'll just say, man, the world is crazy. The world is crazy right now. Like you say this a lot. The world is crazy right now. And it gets a little overplayed, and it's like, how crazy is the world? And, shit probably doesn't compare anything to the late 1930s, 1940s, World War II, or the Cold War, but January 2025 feels like the world is crazy, like beyond anything that I could really wrap my head around prior. So, do you think the same, Herschel?
I mean, I would absolutely agree. I know you had, a short list. This is not even necessarily all of the fucking things that have happened thus far this year, but I do like this short list of items that, if you want to go ahead and share with our esteemed listeners.
Yep. Okay, man. Well,
briefly on
just rapid fire real quick. All right. So, this started off last year, but the official lawsuit was filed this year. Drake suing his publishing company, Universal Media Group. And, this was a crazy news story last year because it's being discussed or construed as Drake suing Kendrick Lamar and dropping the ball on this beef, which is about to look real ugly for him because we don't know the results at this moment. But tonight, when we're recording this podcast, Kendrick Lamar could win the Grammy for Song of the Year for Not Like Us, which would just be like Drake's worst nightmare. But Drake filed a lawsuit. Another lawsuit. Skip Bayless was in a lawsuit along with Fox Sports 1 and an executive there. I think his name is Charlie Dixon, for improper behavior with an employee. I don't remember her name. Obviously, links in the show notes. Suing those people, those parts. Emmanuel Acho was also in the lawsuit. A lot of scandalous behavior. Emmanuel Acho, Joy Taylor, Jason Whitlock had to throw his 2 cents into the ring and just muddle.
We don't need to discuss the fat bastard. We actually don't need to even say his name.
Oh man,
he's not going to be in the show notes. I'm gonna say that right now.
Well, there you go. There you go. But that was a bombshell lawsuit. Recently, and this is not in like chronological order, but it all happened in January 2025. Recently, very sad, upsetting for me. I get really upset with these mass casualty events, but the plane crash in DCA, I lived in DC. I used to fly out of DCA to come to Atlanta to kick it with my boy Herschel. So there's a lot being said about how there's like a lot more flights coming out of there because it's very convenient. It's super convenient. Like I remember I had to fly out of Dulles a couple times. It's like not that far out, but it could be like an hour of travel. But anyway, horrible plane crash. Of course, Trump's inauguration, January 20th. Makes me so upset that it also happened on Martin Luther King Day. That happened, completely launching our nation into mayhem and just madness. And so a couple of days before that actually happened, Trump launched a meme coin. Melania launched a meme coin. I'm going to skip this next one and get back to it. This one is a little bit more personal to me, but there was an earthquake in Massachusetts last week, I believe. I didn't feel it, but apparently it was like it was like a 3.8 of magnitude. So I believe that's the type of earthquake you can definitely feel. I think it was less magnitude in Boston, but I'll put that in the show notes. But that apparently was like a once in a 5-year type thing. So that was crazy. We're going to talk about it in more detail, but the federal government freezing payments, Elon Musk's fork in the road email resignation letter, the LA fires all throughout January. That's been another devastating thing. A lot of people suffering. You had to talk to my boys, Ari and Jay. They're doing well. Shout out to y'all, the West Coast Connection. Ari, the king of hot takes, and Jay Williamson, our music correspondent, or our music expert, I should say. DeepSeek, the artificial intelligence chatbot, large language model, was released last week, or it's been released for several weeks now, but it caused a massive loss in the stock market for the tech companies. NVIDIA lost the most ever okay, that's a whole other like angle to the DeepSeek thing, but the greatest loss in the stock market for one company in one day, almost 600 billion Nvidia in wealth or value, market cap that it lost in one day because of the DeepSeek artificial intelligence chatbot large language model. I'll put in the show notes for more specific details, but another major just like earth-shattering event. And then the one that absolutely is probably the top most earth-shattering thing to happen, it will actually happen February 1st. So whatever, fuck it. Luka gets traded to the Lakers for Anthony Davis. This is the craziest trade I've ever known to exist in the NBA. A lot of people are saying in NBA history, you know, maybe, I don't know. But massive just craziness. Herschel, did I miss anything, man? That's crazy. Just saying it, dude, is like, woo!
I mean, you hit a lot of the good points. There are obviously many more things. And I will just say, like, you know, obviously, you know, we live in this fucked up 24-hour news cycle situation where like many things do get kind of blasted out at you very, very quickly. Everything does seem like a crisis these days. I do want to say that many of these things are not exaggerated in, you know, how we're describing them as like catastrophic, if you will, you know, whether they are, like you said, the fires or you know, y'all check out our podcast coming soon, RTBTH Money, which is going to be talking about DeepSeek and the stock valuations and other elements of Trump coin and fucking all these other things that are related to the federal government's money, the United States money, the economy, all that shit that people were talking about. Oh yeah, you know, I just want the price of eggs. Fuck out of here. You know, we'll talk about that stuff later, but I do think you did a good job of summating many of the things that are just causing, you know, a lot of anxiety across the board for all, you know, people who are, you know, people will try to say, oh yeah, I'm tuned out of politics. I'm not listening to things like this. Oh, meanwhile, Patrick Mahomes is about to three-peat in the Super Bowl.
That's another one.
You know, we're not even going to talk about, you know, obviously there are conspiracy theories of shit being rigged and whatnot, refs. You know, I personally think, you know, hey, you got to beat the champ if you want to be the champ. I don't think anybody's done enough to beat them, but that's neither here nor there. Long story short, there's a lot of shit going down. So I appreciate you guys, listeners, coming in, tuning in with us. We're going to break down just a few of the things more relevant, particularly to us, me specifically working for CDC and just as a federal employee. I'm sure you guys have seen some of the things going down, but yeah, I totally agree today. Like, you know, I don't want it to be hyperbolic. I feel like we say this every year, like, oh, it's a new year and damn, shit is going crazy. And I mean, sometimes it is, but it also, you know, we should absolutely recognize that shit is escalating, like at a clip that is terrifying. I've had some other conversations with some other friends of the podcast. Our travel expert, Justin, has given, again, he's going to be featured on RTBTH Money coming soon, but there are all kind of machinations that are occurring that, you know, the outset is just very bleak, if you will. We are here to try to, you know, have some hope. I've been doom and gloom in the past. I've definitely, you know, tuned to giving you an earful of like, bro, it's ain't no hope for us. You know, humanity, you know, we fucked up. I think there are some ways out, but like for sure, I think that, you know, like we were saying during those pandemic pods, hey, yo, you gotta, you know, wealth, health, and I forget the third fucking thing, but like, you know, you need to be personally accountable of your own shit because it's a lot of bullshit out there. It's a lot of online internet shit, you know, that it is very, very easy to get caught up in. It's dangerous, you know, protect yourselves out here. Meanwhile, protect your ears by listening to this podcast. What's up?
Protect your brain because like you said, there's a lot of internet bullshit and I have a podcast of mine. I'm hoping we can get Instigator, Investigator, official third co-host back on the podcast to do the three of us. I wanted to use that podcast to kind of like reintroduce like the meat of RTBTH, which is we are analysts in our work, in our lives. And that's what we try to do on the podcast is analyze this societal sports. Anyway, you know, these topics, but put that to the side for now. Basically, I think that you described like a very, like what you said, Herschel, you know, I agree with in the way the sentiment that you communicated is like, don't want to feel too hyperbolic, but it feels like we're in a fork in the road, which is an allusion to the email that Herschel got, which is what kind of spurred this podcast. I will say a few things quickly before we get more specific, which is, I think that we are in a little bit of a fork in the road, like it feels a little terrifying, especially with all this news about Elon Musk. I'm like, is our country being like cooed right now? Like, is this like a coup, the slow moving technocratic oligarchic coup? That it's like, it feels really terrifying in that way.
It's not a coup if they got the power. They are the established. They are, I forget, the Federation. If we're using Star Wars analogies, they are the bad guys, and we're trying to be
the Galactic Empire.
Yes, they're the Galactic Empire. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, Musk obviously is not elected, but they are already there in power, and it's just like a sort of in striking distance between them being in official power to them being in
and that makes it even worse, though. Him not being an elected official makes it even worse because there's no option to remove him from power. His power is his money, and we continue to give him that. And, again, to be very frank about it, he's not the only one. We saw a billionaire up on that stage, on that inauguration stage, including Bezos and including your boy, Mark Zuckerberg. I know that's your boy. I know y'all tight today. I know that's,
no,
you and him
not at all.
Get along. But I mean, listen, at the same time that we are spewing these things, my mother-in-law said today, oh, yeah, we got to boycott Target and this and that and whatever. Meanwhile, Amazon and these things are similarly erasing DEI programs, or actually, I don't even want to use that term because I'm going to get to it, but they're erasing diversity. I'm going to use the exact words rather than when acronyms and things like that are used, because I think it overwashes. And I think that words and symbolism, particularly in this time, are very, very important.
Yeah.
But just,
well said.
I know I'm digressing, but Amazon, I hate what Jeff Bezos and the control that he and Elon and others are having over our country. But we live in this society where convenience is king. And goddamn, Amazon is really, really good at giving you 1-2 day shipping. I think we said it in the group chat today. Like, it's very difficult to cut that cord. Shit, you see what, I'm not on TikTok. I have made sure that no one in my family is on that shit. But you see how the country responded to whatever the fuck that foolishness was of, oh, we're going to ban it. Oh, we might ban it. We might not ban it. Oh, actually, Daddy Trump let us have it back, even though how the fuck is the executive branch usurping the other two branches, the legislative and judicial branch in the Congress and Supreme Court, who had already said, nah, the shit's banned, whatever. And then before this man's even elected, they're giving him credit for, oh yeah, it's back. We're just going to let it be back for a few more months or this or that or whatever till it gets figured out. Meanwhile, we, the citizens, so long as we have our bread and circuses, we're good. So long as, like, I don't want to cut to the chase here, but like, obviously today we're talking about some breaking points, some forks in the road, if you will, that, does allude to at some point, revolution, some kind of, pushback against the powers that be. We saw a damn Luigi Mangione out here.
Yeah. And, that was like a kind of like a warning shot for what society might
unintended
plunge into. Yeah. But yeah, that's a sentiment that I feel, I'm trying not to get sucked into the news cycle and kind of follow and become obsessive with the news and how things are playing out. But it feels very serious to me. The federal payments being shut down is like, evidence of like a very...
Make sure you elaborate on that specifically. Like when you're saying federal payments, you're referring to like the grants and NIH funding. Go ahead.
I mean, it was nationwide, kind of like that was that was the intention. Trump had sort of, I don't have the most detailed like socio-political analysis or policy analysis of how these things play out. So we'll, link to these things for you to become more informed. But my understanding is that Trump administered an executive order to like stop like all federal payments of all kinds. And my understanding is that it's literally everything: Social Security, healthcare, maybe even people's salaries in various departments and things. So it's very that's evidence right there of like a real serious shift in the world, in the atmosphere, in the fortunes of our nation and our people.
Absolutely. And especially so one of the problematic things about this is it's under the guise of trying to describe this. Oh man, we need to just get a hold of government spending and understand, and know, okay, the federal government is big and bloated. And, my friend Elon here, is going to help us trim these things back and this and that. And they are lies. To put it, I was going to try to use a different word, but straight up, they are lies. Like what they're doing is essentially seizing control of the power and the means where, whether, considering it like grant funding, because let's just start there. I don't think that they removed any federal employee funding, though that is a step that they are essentially looking into taking in a discussion that we're going to have in just a second. But all of these programs, whether state funded, local funded programs involving any and everything, including people in doctoral programs, people in public universities that are participating. It's a way for him to basically like kind of crack the whip and get all of these different programs. And it's fast. I've only touched on like a little bit of it to get them to kind of fall in line. And again, make sure that the conservative views that he and the people that are behind him, because let's not forget, it's not just him, the people behind him are pushing to try to, do a lot of things to essentially whitewash our country back to what they think was a better time. And obviously the biggest fear is people don't realize, many people who probably voted for him don't realize that they are also getting caught up in this wave of, I don't know, God, what popped into my brain was cancel culture. And I only say that, and I'm saying it now because, if you remove the means for someone to express themselves, to get paid, to feed themselves, to house themselves, that to me is cancellation. That is where, that term, obviously we use it in public, conversation or whatever. But when you're doing that to scientists, when you're doing that to universities, liberal arts universities that, are essentially to them creating a population that is going to oppose their rule, that's what he's doing, trying to kneecap them, cut them off at the knees. Same thing is essentially happening with their proposals to cut the Department of Education and shit like that, where obviously, Tunde, we are very fortunate to have gone to, a dope ass private school, gone on to get, numerous academic, achievements. And ideally, our dreams are going to be, even greater than our ancestors could ever imagine. They are trying to stop, people like us who, not that we're coming from goddamn the mud, but they don't want you to be able to elevate class wise. They want you, okay, wherever you're at, you got to stay there. And we are going to just, move these levers and pieces to eventually where like you didn't even notice, but now, there is no hope for you. Actually, you're not going to be able to get into this school. You're not going to be able to afford it because you got to pay for your, food and groceries. And, if you want some good education, you're going to have to pay for that. And, on and on and on and on until we find ourselves in a position where those in power continue to maintain power. And, long story short, what ends up happening is, of course, the masses revolt against that. It's happened many times throughout history. I don't understand why people just kind of forget that and assume that the shit not going to happen again. Like when we see it's the shit happening, but, people live in very different worlds. And of course, what they've done is, basically split we, the people, I use that colloquial, people who are not the 1%, to where a bunch of people don't believe that the world is out to get them. And if the world is out to get them, it's because of Black and brown people. Like that's the divide that they've decided to throw out here. And many, many of the choices and decisions have been seated in that. But, with that, I would like to jump first into one of your president's selections to his cabinet, the upcoming HHS secretary. I don't believe he's been sworn in yet, but Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr., his punk ass, after his father was assassinated, we're not going to get into that today, with his funny ass, weak ass voice. Yeah, I am going to roast his ass. Fuck him. Because he's going to endanger many, many people, not just Black people, very much Black people, but not just that, but literally maybe 2 days ago. And he's had comments about vaccines and medicines and different things like that in the past. But while he was having his hearing in front of Congress, I don't remember the congresswoman's name. I should look that up. Hopefully it'll be in the show notes. She just essentially asked him about some of the statements that he's been making. He is not a medical doctor. Let me preface with that. He's not a scientist at all. I don't know what the fuck this dude does. I mean, he's a career politician. He was just running for president, if, lest we forget.
Yep.
But essentially, he has described Black people as not requiring as many antigens as white people. And to just simplify that, he is essentially saying Black people don't need to get vaccines or don't need the same vaccine schedule. They don't need the same, if we're just boiling it down to easy mode, they don't need the same medicine as white people because their bodies are stronger. And that type of racism, just like this wonderful congresswoman said, is incredibly dangerous. Not only for black people, because there are going to be some white people and some black people and some doctors and people like that. Oh, yeah, no, he said it's okay. So we're just going to delay this for you. And then that's how outbreaks happen. That's how the disease spreads. That's how, not only do black people, it ravage the black community, but it also ravages the white community. One of the tricks that racists and particularly recent Republicans have played on everyone is telling you that DEI and things like that don't benefit white people when they very much do. Affirmative action, which was developed, I want to say in the 70s or 80s, 60s or 70s. I don't remember. I'm going to have to get that specifically. But first off, it was proposed by Republicans. And second, it was acknowledged and recognized and put in place because it was proven to improve outcomes for white people. To have just a little bit of diversity in the room. And then eventually it got co-opted and molded into, okay, this is actually against us. This is black people taking away jobs from, us good, hardworking white people. That's not the case. That has never been the case. But now it has been, manipulated and shifted. And again, with RFK, we get this new level of racism. Shout out to the instigator of this podcast, Ahi, who gave me a new term that I did not know. Lysenkoism is the term. It's named after this guy, Lysenko. He was in the Soviet Union. And long story short, he was basically using this as a pseudoscience to describe inaccurately. I'm going to say it many, many times throughout this so nobody gets me wrong. Inaccurately trying to describe how traits are passed directly from parent to child rather than genetically as we know that they are through other numerous scientific endeavors and papers and research. It is unfounded. It is in the Soviet Union where they were employing this. They were locking up. They were literally imprisoning and executing thousands. I believe the number was over 3,000 other scientists and doctors because they were opposed to this ideology. And, just so we see what has happened to the USSR. And again, in our group chat, we discussed this of we're heading that way with cronyism and putting people in place who are not qualified for it. I've mentioned in the past Chernobyl, the docuseries on Max, which is really, really good, but it very
HBO
shows HBO. Yeah, it was on HBO.
It was HBO. Now they ruined it with Matt. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Great fucking series, but it essentially shows these motherfuckers who are not physicists are up in here pulling levers and fucking shit up. And
actually literally pulling levers.
Way
the nuclear plant.
Way the fuck worse. So this Lysenkoism, Lysenkoism, is akin to phrenology. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of phrenology before. It's used sometimes.
It's discussed pretty regularly in psychology course, intro courses.
Boy, I thought you were going to stop at disgusting. I thought you were going to say because it is toxic as fuck. Where essentially, for our listeners, I'll just break it down. Where people used to do this, they may still do it. I guess to your point today, but they would
in a way.
Brain size.
I don't want to shit on the entire scientific establishment, but some aspects of fMRI can be that because you're trying to measuring. You're trying to sort of determine these abstract traits.
Wow, so you're perpetuating pseudoscience today.
I don't do fMRI. We beef. I don't do fMRI. Okay. No, I'm not. Look,
that's actually good context. That is good context.
The neuroscientists out there and the psychiatrists, I'm not trying to shit all over fMRI, but
that's why we need Ehi. He's a neuroscientist, is he not?
He's a geneticist. But anyway, go on. Sorry, yes, phrenology. What's phrenology?
Yeah, essentially, so these dudes were these white people, these Europeans. Let me just put it like that. They were utilizing it to essentially keep marginalized communities down. They used it in Australia to describe Aboriginal and Maori people as, subhuman, essentially. They were like, oh, yeah, well, they don't have the capability to create, great artists or things or great thinkers because, their brain size is, measured, shaped this way. They used it to justify slavery in a lot of different instances, many different instances. They used it to hold women back. For our female listeners to the pod, salute to you guys, you ladies, excuse me, where they were, again, describing, okay, well, generally the shape of women's head is somewhat different than men's. And they tried to use it to say that they were not as developmentally, intellectual as men. And we know that to be the case. We are feminists on this fucking podcast. Again, we need to be very fucking careful when we have a guy like Trump putting a guy like RFK and others in office. We already had it the first time where he was putting people like the billionaire lady who was over the Department of Education. We saw what the fuck happened there. And now they're getting ready to cut that whole shit. The whole Department of Education, which essentially funds and, you know, creates criteria for public schools across the nation. And, you know, we have some kind of standard to try to live up to. Sure, I will admit and agree that, you know, we are behind. We are, you know, lagging in terms of, you know, compared to other countries. But instead of choosing to invest in that shit, they're like, nah, throw that shit away. Get rid of it. We'll just privatize it. And then, you know, when we privatize it, that will make the cream of the crop rise. And you know what? The historical cream of the crop in fucking America is the white people. Because systemically, that's who has currently the power. And that's who's going to continue to pass on the power. That's why things like critical race theory, which is basically what I'm describing, is, you know, relevant and a factor. It's a true thing. It's not, you know, it's not fucking made up. It's not woke bullshit. It you know, it just is only describing the society that we currently live in, how we got here, and things that are undeniable. The congressmen and people against it, actually, some of them will obviously deny because they're fucking assholes. And some of them are smart enough to know and acknowledge, like, oh, I see where you're leading me, so I'm not even going to take this bait. But many of them are not that fucking smart and will say the dog whistle part out loud and then realize, oh, I'm trapped. Oh, but no, I didn't mean, no, you know, black people can go to these schools. They just got to pay. Or, they, you know, oh, you know, if you just live in this neighborhood, you'll be okay. Yeah, guess who doesn't live in this fucking affluent neighborhood where all the homes are 750,000 plus? Like the floor is 750,000. Like how have we gotten here? But yeah, that's just I know I'm digressing off of RFK, and there are more things that I want to get to specifically relevant to HHS and the government. But how do you feel about your boy?
Well, first of all, I have to say this just because I said it in the group text and I thought it was a very spicy line, so I'm going to say it again. Perhaps maybe us black people don't need all those antigens because we got all this swag in our bloodstream.
Absolutely not, sir. I mean, I feel you, but swag does not stop COVID. They tried that, bro. If we recall, we can listen back to the COVID-19 conspiracy theories podcast where early on, I'm sure y'all heard the shit where it was like, oh yeah, I heard black people don't get COVID.
Okay.
And you see what the fuck happens.
Okay, Herschel,
no, it doesn't work like that.
You make some very compelling points, you know, with this like misinformation thing with like the antigens thing, you know, and it could be very dangerous, and we can get into this in more detail later, but a lot of what is happening with the Trump administration and just kind of like this shift societally in general, and you were kind of saying a lot of how things are moving more so that people can't sort of move in their class and like you know, make their lives better and things like that. I forget the term that you use, but and it's like kind of like this, you know, the seas of power so that the people who have the power can kind of remain and stay in power. And I think that's very much true economically, but a lot of it too also feels like it's like a war on people who are not very educated, you know. And there's like a lot of stuff that's sit on the right and then like the techno right, and you know, there's this whole thing with like the H-1B visas about this American exceptionalism, but there's a lot that's said about like not going to college. There's a lot of people who kind of Bill Maher, who I love to watch. I watch his show every Friday. He kind of advocates for not going to college and all that nonsense because, you know, he says it's not worth it. And even though he went to Cornell, but it's just like, you know, I understand anyway, I'm going off topic, you know, but
it's very easy for him. I don't like Bill Maher. This is one point that we actually do disagree heavily on. And I've watched, you know, a good bit of it as well. You know, and there are instances where he makes some good points. Mm-hmm. I have to concede that, you know, none of them come to mind right now. But for example, let's say, you know, everyone may not necessarily benefit from a college education. I absolutely agree. But they're also removing other opportunities for people to elevate without that. And then they'll point to, oh yeah, but no, you see these couple of streamers and things that got millions of dollars, bro. Those are, again, like 1% aspects. Like you don't, it's almost like, you know, telling a kid, oh, well, you know, maybe you'll go to the NBA. Like that's all you can just put your hopes and dreams on. And sure, some people do end up going to the NBA, but there are a lot of people that end up basically wasting a lot of their time that never had any hope or opportunity. And so much of that is luck. So much of that is knowing enough of the right people and being in the right rooms and just, okay, you achieved in that moment. Somebody saw it, documented it, acknowledged it, and then you got moved up. But, you know, you can't tell me that there are not plenty of people with athletic acumen and capabilities that just never got a chance. Sure. We want to believe, for this this sports analogy and example, that it's a meritocracy, that, we always get that chance. But also having played sports and, like, all right, well, I'm in high school and I'm getting practice reps or whatever. If I drop a couple passes, all right, I might get moved back. And that's all it fucking takes. And then you're, out of the rotation, and who knows what may have happened. And, oh man, well, the quarterback threw me a bad ball, or, there just wasn't the opportunity given to you to succeed in the same ways that others may have had. And again, it is a broken analogy because it is, we're using this as sports, but this can be applied to all types of shit, whether it's, test taking, SAT, standardized testing, or different things in academia. Obviously, we having, gotten a lot of education, if you will, like that is, grounded in, how we're viewing things. And I would be curious what other biases people like Bill Maher have that he's constantly expressing and espousing to his audience, that, some of them do ring true, but a lot of them I think this is an old white man who is not actually connected to, society, and understands that, there are people out here still struggling and getting by. And then all you see on the news is, oh, well, yeah, those black people, they were running in people's houses and, they were eating the dogs, but, it's because they were hungry, and that's what they do in Haiti, and, just racism. It always just kind of goes back to that. And some of it for him, obviously, he's a comedian, may well end up being jokes, but I think that, his viewpoints, many of his viewpoints go beyond just joking. I think he is not a good dude. That's what I think.
Yeah, well, not the first time I've heard that. Parodies, he gets on me a little bit because Bill Maher, to him, is anti-Muslim or anti-Islam or Islamophobic. Sorry, There we go. Islamophobic. And, Bill Maher is phobic for all religion, but he does kind of rail on Islam a lot more, it feels like sometimes. Bill Maher has certainly disappointed me in the past year to 18 months or so, especially with the Gaza war. But I have not fallen off the bandwagon completely. He has remained sensible. He's been very anti-Trump for the most part. But yeah, he's kind of feels a little bit out of touch sometimes with realities. I agree with that. Another thing that I think that, there's some disagreement with. So RFK seems like a kind of a crazy person. And Bill Maher had a great joke. He was saying that, he said something about RFK putting a hamster in a blender or some shit like that, man. It was pretty funny. I'll have to find that joke, but he said it on his last show because apparently RFK was feeding like his birds or some shit with like putting like chickens and other small animals in the blender. And, so the dude is definitely a little off, it appears. But I will say this, our healthcare infrastructure needs a little bit of a shaking up. There were two other nominees. They haven't been approved yet by the Senate. I guess they haven't really gone for their Senate approval yet. But Marty McCary and Jay Bhattacharya have been nominated for director of NIH, Jay Bhattacharya, I think, and then the commissioner of the FDA, Marty McCary. And these are hardcore, scientists, physicians, big time institutions. Jay Bhattacharya, Stanford, Marty McCary, Johns Hopkins. They have these sort of off the beaten path perspectives on healthcare. Jay Bhattacharya signed the Great Barrington Declaration early on in the pandemic, where they were advocating for targeted interventions as opposed to straight lockdowns, which I think, we went a little overboard with. I understand maybe to start off, but it lasted too long, and they were advocating for it for targeted interventions pretty early on. And, he has had like a lot more, I guess, contrarian perspectives, Jay Bhattacharya, with like the pandemic and the vaccines and how they were rolled out and who should get them, who should get however many boosters. Marty McCary too, but Marty McCary has written a couple books. His most recent book, I don't remember the name of, but he basically talks about like, I didn't read the book, but I've seen podcasts where he discusses the book, and his sort of main theses are that healthcare kind of goes about things in ways that are not always in line with empirical science. Like it's kind of like the doctors are not willing to like change and shift and kind of evolve the profession because they're attached to these dogmas, but that are not actually borne out in the empirical science, So, and then even with RFK's approval, what is that? I keep blanking on the name when they go to the Senate for confirmation. His confirmation hearing, he discusses amyloid hypothesis, which has been, and more or less in a way, proven to be fraudulent for Alzheimer's disease as the cause of Alzheimer's disease, or one of the main factors that creates and causes and perpetuates Alzheimer's disease. And this is something that's received like, maybe like $100 billion of funding since the 2000s. And, I don't have the information perfectly well documented in my mind, but my understanding is that there have been a couple studies that have been retracted for fraud, is believed to be fraud, and has been reported in outlets like Science, where those initial hypotheses about the amyloid hypothesis, those initial studies were found to be not, fraudulent. And so therefore the whole lineage of research is potentially is fraudulent as well. And a lot of the interventions that have been invented for the amyloid hypothesis, which is, the goal is to break down the amyloid plaque in the brain that causes Alzheimer's disease, have not actually produced lasting benefit, And there was like a lot of controversy with aducanumab, which was produced by Biogen, and there's another one, these Alzheimer's drugs. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, Herschel, we need a shakeup. Marty McCary, Jay Bhattacharya, solid dudes. I think that they should be confirmed. RFK, he's a whack. He's a quack, sort of. He's a little bit of a quack. A vaccine denier. Denier. So
that's the thing. He's not. It's not that he's a vaccine denier. He has gotten his kids vaccinated, but and to be fair, there are vaccine schedules that essentially describe that vulnerable communities, old people, sick people, sometimes kids, depending on the disease and how it spreads, they should be prioritized. For certain things like pregnant women, things like that, they should be prioritized to mitigate risk.
Yeah, I cannot imagine there would ever be a vaccine where it would explicitly say a certain race should be deprioritized.
Because race is made up. It's a social construct. People, just so we fucking know. Yeah, we black, and we got more swag than everybody, just like Tunde said. But like, the shit is not. We're not genetically different than anyone else. And when people in power infer that, it's very, very damaging and very, very dangerous. And they were doing it in the past. They did it with Henrietta Lacks when they were utilizing her for experimentation. They did it with I'm implying they thought of us as subhuman. They did it with slavery. They did it with Tuskegee experiments. It's part of the reasoning for so much distrust from minorities in
healthcare,
government research.
Yeah, absolutely. Healthcare, it's a very slippery slope when you start talking about you shouldn't or should get this vaccine, or maybe this vaccine is not right for your people. It's a very slippery slope to when it's just like boom, then the community, and this, what I was trying to say is that it feels like there's a war on the people who are not educated, in terms of encouraging people to get educated, but also like kind of tossing out these maybes, where there's this like, do your own research, right? This was like so fucking hilarious in the pandemic. Do your own research. And he said this on the podcast, man, we don't know how to do research. Our society, we don't have the critical thinking. So no, don't do your own research, but you start throwing out these like weird maybes, these what ifs, or this could be's of like, oh, it could be that black people have more antigens. So, and then next thing you know, boom, a whole community in fucking, Grand Rapids, Michigan, stop taking vaccines, So yeah, very, very dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, it's not the tip of the iceberg. It's a big piece of the iceberg, but there are many, many more things. But to move us along, I did want to just go ahead and get into one of our main topics of today, which is
the fork in the road
emails. Yes, particularly this one titled "The Fork in the Road." Go ahead.
Such a hilarious fucking name for an email, man. It's so hilarious. There's a webpage on opm.gov, something, show notes again, please definitely check it out. But it's just so hilarious. I'm sorry.
Personnel management is what that is for. It's basically an HR for
federal government. Yeah. Okay. Quick question before we get into this in more detail. If you're dealing with HR as a CDC employee, like, are you dealing with OPM or just the CDC? Because that's just,
kind of. So it's kind of complex because I work with the CDC. We are an agency under HHS, which is another umbrella agency. There are other things under HHS like
FDA.
NIH, National, FDA, US, NIH. I want to say USDA. Yeah, NIH is one. There are several. And it's the same thing of trying to say like the Department of Defense has like all of the different military branches under it, essentially. Yeah, the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force,
Coast Guard,
and Space Force or whatever. Yeah, Coast Guard, all that shit.
Right? So, quick tangent. I feel like I'm getting a crash course in government like on a daily basis now, you know, just because of all the news and like confirmations, like Department of Defense, Secretary of Defense, you know, confirmation.
It's almost HHS a good thing.
And yeah, well, you know, we'll see.
Anything, when people were trying to be like, okay, well, so how do we stop Trump and and then you get to learn, like, because many people before this couldn't, you know, we learned this in social studies in fucking 7th grade for sure. Yeah. I remember it from then, but a lot of people obviously don't and did, you know, obviously you forget things all the time. Like I'm not trying to say that I fucking remember everything, but like the civics classes of like, okay, what are the 3 branches of government? You can go outside right now, anywhere, and you will be hard pressed to find 10 motherfuckers off the street.
Which is a shame.
That could tell you the 3 different branches of government.
Yeah.
You know,
which is sad.
And they wouldn't say the president. They would be like, yeah, the Army, the Navy, and you know, that's what they would fucking say. For sure.
Yeah.
They say you know, there's some people, sure.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off. All right. So you were saying that that in terms of whether you deal with OPM or CDC has its own HR, because it's just crazy to me that they would just send an email to like pretty much every federal employee talk about a fork in the road.
They couldn't do it until 2 weeks ago. They had to set the shit up. This is where it starts. It doesn't even start with the fork in the road email. Probably about 2 weeks ago, maybe a little more than 2 weeks ago, maybe either right before the inauguration or like right after, they were sending out test emails to our shit that say HR from opm.gov or whatever. Because normally, no, you're not necessarily, I mean, you may deal with them when you're like onboarded, but like there's a person, you know, in your branch or division that you kind of go to with your issue or situation or problem, you know, they kind of handle it. It has to go up a big ass chain. Obviously, this is a huge organization. So, you know, I don't want to say that we don't, you know, I don't deal with them because they handle pay and they handle like, you know, all the bureaucracy, if you will, behind, you know, a lot of the stuff that we, you know, take for granted. As, you know, I'm doing my job, I'm doing science and whatever, but like somebody on the back end has to make sure we get paid and, you know, okay, well, you know, not that we
and like
clock in,
security clearances and shit like that.
Yeah, security. Yeah. Okay. Or even, for example, like when you travel and you travel for the federal government and I'm going to a conference or whatever, somebody got to clear that money. And it may not necessarily be, you know, the CDC does have a budget and things like that, but like things go up the chain.
Yeah.
Just to kind of give you an overarching. Yeah. But like, nah, they could not send us. They basically set up this test server to send test emails. And like, even when we get the fucking email, even, you know, not only I got like 3 test emails, one at 1 a.m., one at 4 a.m. the same day, and another like a couple days later. And the issue each time this thing happens is like people are seeing it and it gives us a note like, okay, this is coming external to your organization. Like this is not like, we don't recognize this for real because they just set it up. Like they rushed it basically. And you know, not only that, they're all worded poorly where like grammar is weird or like shit is vague or whatever. And it's like, yeah, please respond.
Man, that would be so scary.
That's what they look like. So people are reporting them. And then later my actual agency, CDC or someone, you know, over our agency or our division or our department, someone, you know, closer to us, not necessarily like directly my team lead or whatever, has to send out another email like, hey guys, just so you know, that other email that you got, yeah, it was legit. And it's happened multiple times. And even there we're like, okay, if you're fucking up this bad where everybody's questioning your legitimacy and like there's already a problem. But essentially we get to inauguration day, it's the week of inauguration. And this dude, they send out this fork in the road email, which I would also like to remind everybody, when Twitter fired a whole bunch of people or asked for voluntary or resignations, basically, is what they're doing. I don't know if they described it as deferred resignations the way they did with us, because it was a buyout for Twitter. It is not a buyout for CDC. They sent this email out, and first of all, the news got it first. Like normally, leadership, somebody above us would know, and like they would kind of inform. The news got it at 5:30 on a Friday. We got it at 5:34. I got it to my email. All federal employees got it to their email at 5:30. Just after 5:30, and we found out from the news like, oh shit, what the fuck? And you know, imagine, just like we're talking about this Luka Doncic and AD trade, imagine you are chilling doing whatever, and then you look at your fucking phone and it's blowing up because your parents and everybody's calling you like, bro, I heard you got traded, and you didn't even fucking know because you ain't talked to management. You don't fucking know what the fuck going on. And not only that, they're trying to bury it. This happens all the time in politics, and even outside of politics. The NFL will do this. Other organizations and agencies will do this too, of like, oh, let me deliver this bad news on Friday after everybody's gotten off work.
Yeah.
And there's no opportunity for
or before a holiday.
24-hour. Yeah. The 24-hour news cycle doesn't get a chance to like pounce on it because so much other shit has happened through the weekend that like, all right, well, we just moved on. We can't, our brains, can't handle that, I guess, especially after COVID, where like you're getting, so much information. And this was actually a topic that I wanted to talk about on another podcast. But Ted Cruz, you are a billionaire that, I do think there's some merits behind you, but fuck you for setting up this 24-hour news cycle in CNN in the 80s or whenever the fuck you did it, because
Ted Cruz?
This has created, I mean, not Ted Cruz, Ted Turner.
Excuse
me. Atlanta's own Ted Turner.
Like, when did Ted Cruz become a billionaire?
Yeah. Fuck Ted Cruz as well. But Ted Turner set that
with
up.
CNN.
The owner of CNN with, TNT and Turner Broadcasting. All, that's his organization. That's Ted Turner. I keep wanting to say Ted Cruz. I'm sorry. Good edit. Thank you for that. Because I would have fucked up, and fuck Ted Cruz is always on the brain. But,
fair enough.
So essentially,
all right. So
to digress.
Yeah. Well, I guess you were probably about to get into it, but I kind of like why I was in part interested in doing an emergency pod, because to me it's like you have a decision to make, and I actually said in the group text like you're going to take the buyout because this is like presumably this is like a real thing. And do you have the details of like what the buyout is offering, which sounds crazy?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I was talking to someone in person here in Boston. I forgot who it was, but I was like, I don't know, that doesn't sound too bad. Severance until September, but then someone said, or maybe it was in the group text. Anyway, I don't know, but it's like he might not actually pay you. Trump, Musk, whoever whoever he is, or they are, or the government, whatever, they might not actually pay you. I mean, with Twitter, a lot of people didn't get their severance, and I think there's lawsuits happening right now for people to get
insane.
those
severances. That's fucking crazy. But yeah, so just to to make the shit clear, abundantly clear, the government is not funded right now. We're on a continuing resolution. There's no budget, particularly for CDC. I don't know if they're the budgets for some of the other organizations.
Oh yeah, DOD.
I'm pretty sure it's all of us. Yeah.
Who's gonna fly those B-20 stealth bombers?
Yeah, they're out here fucking sending fucking, just talking about money when they don't have, they're out of pocket. How can you make these claims when nobody but Congress gets to determine whether or not this is even legitimate or reasonable? But basically, for those that don't already know, it is a deferred resignation agreement. Essentially, they would ask you to retire asexually, but for the next 8 months, you will get paid your regular paycheck. It is not a buyout of, I get this lump sum of cash and then I get to go on and do whatever. Their goal, as I had mentioned before, Elon and them are trying to, cut back on government spending. And they think doing that is through cutting back on employees. They've also tried to add, put in place tactics to make it basically a toxic work environment. They're trying to send us in 5 days a week, which, I understand people used to do that shit. That's what they're trying to, like most Americans. Everybody has, hey, bro, what the fuck? Everybody does not do the same job. So how, one of my biggest issues with this is, you're making these blanket policies when everybody is not working doing the same work. So how would this potentially apply? On top of that, there isn't necessarily the space to allow, tens of thousands of people to just return to an office where, so for example, like in this removal of telework and return and remote work, where essentially remote would be if you are 50 miles outside of your seated government facility, it's okay for you to work remote. Let's say I have a coworker that worked in Vietnam and he would join meeting, like sometimes we'd have to schedule him at early, like real early, or not outside of, normal US hours, but it'd be like, damn, 8 a.m. instead of, a 12 or a 2 or whatever. Or sometimes it'd be a later, like 5 p.m. And he would just kind of make it work. They are working to get rid of those. But at the present time, you can do that. But if you're within 50 miles, you have to come in. But the thing about one of these emails is it's so poorly written that like we can't interpret it. We're having meetings with our leadership and they're like, bro, we don't actually know how the fuck this is going to go. The way it reads, it's like, if you live within 50 miles of any federal government facility, whether you're working with CDC or the FBI is right across the street. You have to pull up to that office and work there. And what the fuck kind of, how are you going to get clearance to even get into this building? Like, nobody thought this far through to think and understand it and just even write the email better so that there would be clarity. But there is no clarity. It basically, so much of this, I feel, is they're sending out information with chaos to create and cause chaos. And again, with that panic, encourage people to just resign and leave.
Yeah. I've read stuff about that, well, not necessarily that tactic, which makes sense, but that it's kind of like actually motivating people to go in the opposite direction, which is to stick it out and stick it to them. Man, it's so messed up because, I don't know the studies. I haven't read any specific studies, but I feel like you could probably find some data somewhere that work from home or hybrid work it actually benefits for certain people.
Much research.
Like for myself, I don't have a family, even for you do have a family. Like, you can just get up and go. But I'm thinking about moms and women, like, I would anticipate, especially because they take on more of the burden of childcare and elderly care, your aging parents, women tend to take on more of that responsibility. Like, I think maybe in the depths of Elon Musk's mind, he thinks that people are just like, sort of rocking their baby to sleep all day long. It's, maybe people have to take,
we're slackers.
Maybe people have to take 5-10 minutes here and there to put the baby to sleep or feed the baby or do something for mom or dad, your aging parents, like I said. But it's not like people are just like, rejecting or sort of foregoing their work. Like, people have to figure things out, and the convenience of remote just makes that better, easier. It makes it more manageable, So it's just crazy that you would, for a department of government efficiency, it doesn't seem very sensible. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of analysis as to what actually will make the government more efficient. I mean, if you really wanted to be super efficient, you would get rid of all the building space, stop paying for it, and just let everyone work from home, Send everyone a VR headset if you want it to be collaborative or whatever bullshit, I mean, that's one way you could be efficient. Just sell all the real estate. Nobody ever has to walk in nowhere anymore.
Yeah. But so they've set up concepts of a plan, basically, to use one of Trump's terms. But like, I'm going to read basically the 4 pillars. I'm not going to read the whole email, just the 4 pillars that they describe of like why they're essentially reforming the federal workforce. And you will see like, okay, these actually don't make sense. They don't align with each other, even the fucking pillars. They are counterproductive. But it's okay. So number 1, return to office. The substantial majority of federal employees who have been working remotely since COVID, which pause, we were doing telework before COVID. So you're already fucking dismissing the fact that like we were teleworking at least 2 days out of a 5-day work week just for space reasons alone. But I continue. Going forward, we also expect our physical offices to undergo meaningful consolidation and divestitures, which just means, again, selling off, just like you said, which again doesn't make any sense if like, okay, you're trying to consolidate and shrink the size, but you also want us all to fucking come back into work. Like what? How does that work? Potentially resulting in physical office relocations for a number of federal employees. So again, you're going to force people to move. And if they can't move, they're going to have to resign. Is basically, that's super fucked up. Number 2, performance culture, which is again scary where like, so we already have, just to preface, we already have, PMAPs in place.
Thing to like a ridiculous phrase. Fork in the road, performance culture. I mean, all of these terms are just like so outrageous.
Yeah, but they're trying to scrutinize and see where, again, we can kind of put the screws on these people's fingernails and get them to either quit or dock them and figure out how we can fire them for shit that, again, these are hella vague and broad. And the federal government, again, is really, really fucking big. There is no way, a person working for any other agency is doing the same things as what any of us are doing in CDC. It just is different. Like they don't have the same job titles. Our current positions now have, guidelines. There are core competencies, basically, that, even when you're applying to a job, you kind of have to see and meet and fit. And, these are your expectations of what you're going to do. So they're trying to shake all that up. I don't know. There's no plan. We don't have any information on it yet, but they're, I don't know if they're trying to say, okay, it's going to be across the board, all of this, and then you all have to, align with this. But, one of the words that's actually used outside of, these 4 points that I just want to comment on is loyalty. And like, my job as a scientist ain't got shit to do with being loyal to the president. I'm going to just say that shit for real. There's nothing about, what we're doing and the research that we're doing that has, sure, loyal to America, in that like, we don't want to do things that will fuck with the people. But the way a lot of it is written is, directly relevant to the president. But again, I digress. The federal workforce should be comprised of the best America has to offer. We will insist on excellence at every level, which again, cool, great. Yep, I agree. It's not like we were not doing that before. Our performance standards will be updated to reward and promote those that exceed expectation and address in a fair and open way those who do not meet the high standards which the taxpayers of this country have a right to demand. Okay, sure. Yeah, technically in the phrasing of that, that's a good thing or whatever. It sounds like, hard line speech, but like that's also a problematic way to say like, oh no, we're actually going to reassess all this. We're shaking everything up. They're canceling whatever we already had on the books, whether like I prefaced we have telework agreements that, state like, okay, this is where I'm going to work and this is where I'm going to be. And yeah, sure, I have to come into office some days, but like, there's an agreement basically put in place. Same thing with your performance. Like there's something in place. You've agreed to it. Your manager has agreed to it. They're like, nah, fuck that shit. We're shaking it all up. Point 3, and there's only 4. It's not super long. I'm sorry. I know people sometimes hate reading on podcasts, but 4 more streamlined and flexible workplaces. And this is where you're going to see the divergence from some of the other shit that they've said. While a few agencies and even branches of the military are likely to see increases in the size of their workforce. Bro, what the fuck? So you are planning to spend more money. You are planning to excuse me? The majority of federal agencies are likely to be downsized through restructuring, realignments, and reductions in force. Okay, again, there's some bloat. I'm sure there's some shit that's going on, but like the approach that you're taking, I do think is ass backwards. That's again me editorializing all of this. These actions are likely to include the use of furloughs and the reclassification to at-will status for a substantial number of federal employees. So again, from the previous fucking performance point, they are getting ready to get rid of motherfuckers. Like that's their goal, and they don't have the criteria to do that. So they're going to create the shit. Mm-hmm. That is what is quite scary to me personally. And then the last point, enhanced standards of conduct. The federal workforce should be comprised of employees who are reliable, loyal, trustworthy, and who strive for excellence in their daily work. Okay, sure, I guess technically, but we all know what loyalty means in this administration, and it means loyal to Trump. It don't mean shit else. We kind of understand that. We've seen how it goes. He is ready and willing to lock those up who are not, and he is freeing those who were. He just freed the fucking January 6ers who were beating up police and killing people and breaking into federal big buildings, since we're talking about federal fucking workplaces. But essentially, employees will be subject to enhanced standards of suitability and conduct as we move forward. Employees who engage in unlawful behavior or other misconduct will be prioritized for appropriate investigation and discipline, including termination. So those are just the pillars. They do not inspire any kind of, optimism or hope for what all is going on. This was the best written of the plethora of emails that I've gotten from the administration. This one is, at least somewhat put together, but there's still no plan or, information on this. And it just kind of goes on with a template resignation letter that like, it's basically like, yo, yeah, respond yes to this if you wish to resign.
Yeah.
Otherwise, no. And that doesn't include, and one thing, I will say for the government, a lot of people, because the benefits are really good, they just stay and hang around for 30 plus years because, the longer you stay, the more of a pension and payout you do get. That is, kind of the benefit. That is how they actually attract talent. Like that would be a good thing, I'd say. But people, could say, oh, well, this person has stayed in the government too long and they're just kind of suckling at the teat, if you will. And, I do acknowledge that for sure. But the way that they're going about this is, addressing and attacking everybody. I don't know how they've considered, what the optics of this looks like. But if I were a federal employee, I would, regardless of who I voted for previously, I would be looking elsewhere immediately because you're fucking up with, all these other aspects of my life and well-being. So I really just don't understand it.
Well, you are a federal employee, Herschel, and thank you for the breakdown. I was kind of surprised by the text messages that you sent. Then I read a little bit about it, but that sort of overview of like what is being presented to you is like a little striking beyond just the whole resign thing, but this whole idea that we have to, sort of reform the government, implement this performance culture and cut the bloat, which are all sensible things. But this is like something that would require more refined approach, like
absolutely.
The federal government is a very well-oiled machine. There might be some broken parts but it is the United States federal government. And if you are of the Trumpian variety and your ideology about the United States, we're the best, right? We're the best. We can't be defeated. So presumably this is not something where you just like destroy the whole thing. Like you work with what you got and make it better.
To use an analogy, it's doing surgery with a shovel rather than a scalpel.
Yeah, right, exactly.
They're just out here digging in
with the hatchet
and throwing shit
axe.
Just
hacking away when you're trying to do brain surgery.
Yes, not worried about what other loss is going to come and what the ramifications, what the quality of life will be after you've done what it is you've done and how this irreparable damage will be.
Yeah,
and that's just tip of the iceberg.
So Herschel, you don't, obviously you got to protect your job, and we're not trying to come on the podcast and get too spicy.
Don't air me out.
Even though we've gotten a little heated, a little hot, a little spicy, a little fuego on the podcast already, but we're not trying to like turn it all the way up. We're not trying to, start a fire in this motherfucker. But I mean, what's your mind like? Where are you mentally? Obviously you don't have to tell us the specifics about I'm going to take this or not take this. I'm looking for a job or not.
I'm not taking that shit. I can
okay, well, that. There you go. All right.
Yeah. And I'll just jump in there. So first off, I have First Amendment rights of freedom of speech, and it would be an act against me for the government to take my job for things I've said on a podcast. Secondly, all of the things that I've stated today are already in the media and available. We have been having meetings from, our leadership and stuff where it's like, yeah, we can't talk to the media. We can't, talk to any of the recipients that, we might work with as CDC of like, oh, you can't talk to them in groups. You can technically talk individually, but they don't even want shit written down. Don't send emails. If you do a quick one-on-one call, sure, maybe you could do some shit like that. But I have not said anything that is not already, out there and known. But no, I don't intend on taking it. I am having a lot of anxiety about the fact that I am going to have to change my lifestyle significantly to go into work.
You mean work in? I mean, honestly, look, I don't want to, tell you what's going to be or not be. Obviously, what you're dealing with, what you have on the table. But I'm like you said, the way that has been done has just been like this ham-fisted, very, shotgun style, just blast the whole space and see what lands type of thing. And I mean, who knows when the fuck that's just actually going to be implemented, So, I understand.
Dates. So that's the thing. For return to work, they have given hard and fast dates, which also is like, bro, you gave dates, but you don't have a system in place. Even our leadership, we've had like multiple special branch meetings and, our regular team meeting weekly, whatever. And each time somebody comes in is like, oh yeah, we had a fucking coffee and conversations with, some director this past Friday. And they're like, yeah, we actually don't know shit for real. Still, we're just waiting for the administration to interpret, like I said, concepts of a plan. We have this deadline. We have this date. So like, yeah, I guess we're going to have to do something by then. So, somewhat prepare yourselves. But like the actual implementation is, an unknown, is a complete unknown. There are some factors that are like, they're aware of because my team at least, actually, no, all of CDC and I believe most other agencies have been going in at least once a pay or twice a pay period, which is once a week before Trump came back. And again, I acknowledge, we were talking about divesting from some of these buildings and stuff. Like some of them are federal buildings on federal land where like they're not paying shit. They're not paying taxes back to themselves. It is a cost, to maintain. And I believe it does affect efficiency of, having to pay for, all the utilities, the AC, the water bill, all that crap, to force people to come in. Whereas you've punted all of that to your employee by having them work from home. And
that's true.
We've all had the capability to work from home. Like you set up very quickly. Oh yeah, we all got monitors and, some kind of office space. And either you were doing your job or you weren't. Like there were still people who weren't doing their job and they were getting fired or they were getting bad reviews, before this. This is not, you're not, just because you're shaking it up doesn't necessarily mean that you
are doing something
shake as many
different
trees as you want. Yeah,
that wasn't happening before in terms of cutting the fat or whatever. Maybe it could have been, the pace could have picked up more, but presumably like the government isn't really trying to be paying people to like sit on their ass. Like, presumably the government would have methods for extracting those people.
Yes. And to be devil's advocate, to be fair, I would love to sit on my ass. That there are, like you said, almost certainly there are people that are doing that. And, it should, to me, reflect in the work that they can speak to. But, as a person who is not sitting on his ass, I'm very upset about it. And, being essentially punished for, actually, no, punished is not even the right word. The right word will have to come to me, but I'm pissed. I'm pissed about it. Because like I said, podcast listeners may know I have a son, I have a family and shit. I want to get home to hang out with him. We have to rethink how our childcare is going to be. We have to rethink, all types of things. Like, what if those who don't have the same means of transportation that I do, like, both my wife and I have a car, but like, obviously, so one thing that I think is very interesting and could be a positive, all federal sites, almost all, I shouldn't say every single last one, but at the very least, the ones that I am familiar with and work with, they are accessible by public transit. It's almost like a requirement of like, okay, if you're putting a building here, people have to be able to get here via public transit.
Man, that shit is not real.
But it's not realistic of like, bro, you're not going to fucking get, like, sure, maybe New York or DC or somewhere like that. Sure. Yeah. But like to think of being a working person that also is taking care of other things of like, oh yeah, I need to go to the grocery store and, just regular ass well-being things. If I'm coming in 5 days a week and I have to now spend, the 8 hours of working and 2 hours potentially front end or the back end and back end of, going to and from work, we're going to have serious problems. Like that's, people have already bought homes. They live or are renting or, doing whatever the fuck they want to do wherever they live. And to think that now, like, we have to figure out how to manage to get into this and on a short timeline, that's what's problematic. Like, sure, maybe if this was, LinkedIned out, we could be reasonably, all right, well, we need to think about how you've given us a runway here of, we need to think about how to manage and manifest this. But, since COVID, it's been pushed back. Because also, don't nobody want to fucking come in the office. Nobody wants to have this small talk. It's, some people do. Sure, it's fine. It's nice to see people in person and be personable. But like, bro, I'm not getting any better work at the very least for my job. I'm not getting more work done with you standing over me in my cubicle. Like, this is not helpful. We're sure, we can collab. We can do some things. I have had some success in doing that before the pandemic. Sure. But we have Teams and shit like that now. Microsoft Teams specifically, where like, oh yeah, just shoot me a message. We can chat about this. Or if we need to get on a call, we can video call like Tunde, you and I are right now. And, hash this out and solve this, have this meeting rather than, waste all of this other energy of like physical, personal energy or, car energy and gas or whatever. Not to mention, not having driven my car 10,000 miles a year since the pandemic, that's a godsend in itself of like, okay, now I don't have these extra maintenance costs of, people are not recognizing the additional strain that we're about to put on society where, even the fucking roads and stuff of like, all right, everything is going to become that much more congested. And they don't care. That's not what they're thinking about. We are going to see more and more U.S. infrastructure fucking fall apart. And, they're just going to blame minorities and the Democrats who do deserve some blame, but not for destroying this.
Man,
shit.
I'm not even
just not fucking getting their shit together to assist. But
look, the Democrats fucked us. They completely fucked us. I'm not going to go ham right now. I've been going ham in various capacities to different friends and here and there, but the Democrats completely fucked us. Joe Biden completely fucked us. I was not a huge fan of Kamala. I voted for Kamala, but the fact that we couldn't have a democratic process, with the primary and nominating a nominee properly means that they fucked us.
So one of the last things that, I do want to talk about with this is like, they are also scrubbing federal government data. This is another directive that's basically coming down from conservatives, but through Trump, through RFK, to where they are getting rid of, anything that's potentially related to DEI. They're, removing those positions entirely just off rip. And people don't even recognize and acknowledge like which positions are actually involved with that. They're just
black jobs.
Black jobs. Exactly.
Man, look, Trump is a tyrant, just malignant person, but man, he be saying some funny shit, man. He said the immigrants are taking black jobs. He said that like during the campaign. I'm like, bro, what's a black job?
Black journalist.
Like, what's this like? It's like every job has a color, and those are black ones. Those are blue jobs. It's just like, bro, what are you saying, bro? But basically, DEI jobs are black jobs. If it was up to Trump.
Yeah. And so he's basically also scrubbing like any and all language related to social determinants of health, which for those listening is just, anything that isn't necessarily disease oriented, that's related to like why you may be at higher risk for getting such and such disease, whether it's your skin color or you being a woman or, you're low income or poverty, you live in a impoverished area, social vulnerability index, health related social needs, all these different things that are language that they've associated with diversity, equity, and inclusion, where so much of public health, which is what we work in, is directly related to that. Like they're basically scrubbing that. Like it's almost like, bro, you trying to shut down like all CDC research and scientists? Like that is, kind of the concern. People are looking to be like, okay, well, how do we rebrand this and hide, quote unquote, essentially hide what it is that we are doing? I don't work on, projects that necessarily work on that directly anymore, but I did. And they are abundant. It's all encompassing. Like anything that you can think of, it is more likely that a poor black person is at greater risk for than a rich white person. It just is one of those things that you can automatically kind of acknowledge of just like,
right.
But, I don't want you to do that. I want you to read the research, which also says the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
I don't, just to be clear.
That is a weird, that's a weird, messed up, slippery slope, because if you are just kind of like reporting on this phenomena and you want to, as a public health specialist and researcher and someone who wants to develop interventions, perhaps maybe it makes sense to kind of target things from a race perspective or, a race class perspective. But if it's just like everything under the sun is just DEI and cut it out, is just, kind of like a slippery slope with the whole vaccine. Black people have more antigens thing. It's just like you start with like that little patina of an idea, and
false equivalency. Yeah. Some shit that they throw in, and then they hit you with a water hose because it's too many different things for you to address all of them at once. Speaking of, they're doing the same thing with trans, and you essentially cannot use any of that language, which, anything that's discussing LGBTQIA, they are essentially scrubbing that as well. So it's one of those things where like, okay, they came for the transgender people and I did nothing because I'm not transgender. And then they came for me and there was no one left to defend me. It is very much a situation like that. That's not on the horizon. The fucking sun is up. Like it's up right now. We're fucking living the shit. They've also removed instances of like, you can't celebrate any quote unquote diverse holidays. Like, sure, the federal holiday is still there, but you can't have no damn poster up in your office that says Happy Black History Month, or send out an email blast of like, oh yeah, hey, it's Black History Month, we're celebrating this, these scientists, or this is an accomplishment or achievement, or benign things, casual, random, whatever things that they're like, oh no, we can't, and it's not just black people. There are ones related to the Holocaust. There's women's month. I forget which one, Latin and Hispanic month and holidays, MLK Day, Juneteenth. Again, and for those two, they are still federal holidays where federal buildings will be closed, but you better not say shit about them. You better not. I mean, tomorrow when I go in, I'm damn sure I'm going to be waving to folks Happy Black History Month, but that might be my last. Who knows? Who knows today?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Well, I mean, that's the scary part. And that's the messed up part of this whole enterprise that Trump and it seems like Musk as well is trying to push on the federal government. And I think there's opportunity for reform and maybe shifting the message a little bit. I personally think, and perhaps this is a hot take and maybe you'll disagree, but I think the DEI language has gone overboard in some respects, and it dilutes the accomplishments at times of black people just doing their thing, balling, just being the best. It can compel certain people, white people, whatever you want to call it, or the Trumpian fan base to kind of say, well, how did you get there? How did you become the mayor of what city was it when he was like a DI mayor? Baltimore, I think, when the bridge came down. It's just like you're now questioning this man's ability.
How even was that the mayor's fault? Like that was a racist dog whistle, no, of them going back to say like, okay, well, you mayor, it's your fault that this boat hit the bridge and then the bridge collapsed.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It is. But what I'm saying is that because of this like essential hyper focus on DEI, the industry, it now everything's up for game. Like they have to overcorrect to the point where now they're denigrating the accomplishments of minorities who are just ballers. Anyway, Herschel, thank you for the insight. Thank you for the inside scoop of things that we're reading on the internet, and I want to leave you and our listeners with 2 antidotes for dealing with the madness that we're experiencing in the second Trump era. One of them is a little facetious. The other one is very serious. I'll start off with the facetious one, which is Mitch McConnell, grow some balls and impeach this guy. Mitch McConnell is not the majority leader in the Senate anymore, but he's still the king of the Republican Party in the Senate. And maybe he's not the king.
Can he fog a mirror, though? Can he fog a mirror? Does he have a pulse? Does he know what day it is today? Well, if we're putting our eggs in the Mitch McConnell basket, they better be some expensive ass eggs.
Well, I actually thought of Mitch McConnell because just before we came on the podcast, I was watching a segment that is on 60 Minutes for this week. They're interviewing Mitch McConnell, and he had a little bit of backbone. He's like still he communicates, or he signals a little bit of like anti-Trumpness, and I guess he's willing to recognize that Trump is potentially dangerous for our democracy, Trump is a vile person. I think he's willing to acknowledge that, but he's still a Republican. Mitch McConnell, he's still a Republican, and he said that he was going to vote, or he was going to support whoever the Republican nominee was, which was Trump. And he didn't vote for him to be impeached the second time Trump was impeached. But he said that he thought that January 6th was a bad day for America, and he, said that what Trump said about his wife was very bad and was not a good thing for him to do. And, he's still got some backbone against Trump, but I'm just like, look, the Democrats will be there to vote to impeach him. It might not be necessarily appropriate right away, but something probably will come up. And I'm just like, Republicans, this is your opportunity. Just go ahead and run it through. Go ahead and get these votes, run that shit through the Senate, and just, get them up out of there. And look, Mitch McConnell said that he didn't want to sort of talk against Trump or sort of go against Trump in the 2024 election because he wanted the American people to vote for their president. He didn't want to, I guess, to attack Trump or go after the Trump campaign because he's claiming that the American people should be the ones to vote and elect their president, which is understandable, but they voted. And if JD Vance becomes president, they voted for JD Vance. So just let it happen, Mitch McConnell. Hear me, Mitch McConnell, please. If this podcast, I'm going to tweet this shit to you. Impeach.
Truly the darkest timeline. We're hoping for Mitch McConnell to do the right fucking thing.
And for JD Vance to become president?
Yes, which is also not fucking good.
I'll take that all day. I agree. It wouldn't be good, but I'll take that in a heartbeat. I'll take JD Vance in a heartbeat. All right, the second antidote, which is more serious. That one I'm sure is not going to happen. I think the Republicans have a chance if they really wanted to get their shit together and really just, because we could just like excise him once and for all and just boom, be done. But the second antidote is connect with your neighbor, with the community that you live in, with the people around you, because a lot of this shit happens online on the internet. Even these emails, fork in the road, you saw it in email format. It gets played out on Twitter and in the social media platforms, and the whole TikTok nonsense, man, was just like, it's like a lot of digital drugs, digital dopamine, just like, there's a lot that's being written recently
that's
about.
That's a great word or phrase, digital dopamine. I like that.
Well, I think I took it from Anna Lemke, who did a podcast with the New York Times. I'll post it, but she's an addiction researcher at Stanford, psychiatrist, and has written books. Actually, she wrote a book called Dopamine Nation about just, you know, the social media digital world that we live in and how it's addicting us and just kind of warping our minds and our cultures and our societies and our communities. But there's been a couple books published recently. I'll post them. One from Chris Hayes, who works for MSNBC. He writes about attention, that podcast with Anna Lemke. You know, it's been a little bit more in my immediate attention recently, but so much of what we do is just so digitally focused. I'm like, the antidote is community. Big shout to Iman. She advocates for community, connecting with your fellow neighbor, your fellow human, your community member, talking to people, going and talking to people to their face. You know what I'm saying? I got to give a shout out to my brother Kola, who competes in the world of Super Smash, but he signed up for swimming lessons at his local YMCA. And I was like, my nigga, you out here, because he has to go to the pool. Someone is going to teach him those lessons. He has to learn those lessons. He's going to talk to people. There are other people who are going to be learning how to swim. And it's going to be one of those things that was just super normal in probably the 60s and 70s and 80s, 90s, even 2000s. But now,
not for black kids, but salute to him. I see him.
Yeah.
Do you know how to swim, Tunde? Do you know how to swim?
I do know how to swim. Self-taught. Bentley Manor apartment complex. Because I was up in the pool all the time. And I didn't know how to swim, but I got up in the pool and I figured it out. Or else I was just going to die. So, no, but anyway, but big shout to the little bro, because again, you know, the thing that he did is that he got up off his ass. He went to the YMCA, he signed up for swimming classes, and he's doing it in his community, his local YMCA. And I think that's the type of energy we need in order to counterbalance the mayhem and the chaos that we're experiencing in our society.
Yeah. Great sign off too. All right, yo, appreciate y'all listening. Hit us up. Hashtag RTBTH. What's our email?
That's the first time.
Headlines.
realtalkbth@gmail.com. But that's the first time we actually said the RTBTH on the podcast because we came in hot.
Yeah, I be forgetting, bro.
I forget. No. I mean, no, we usually start off like immediately like RTBTH, and we have the intro music, but we came in hot today, man. We had some shit to say.
Yeah.
You know.
It's hot times. You know, it calls for it. Can we at least have the intro or the outro?
Outro music coming right up.
Do intro. All right. Peace.
Hashtag RTBTH. Real talk beyond the headlines. We out. We out.
Okay, give me a second to breathe.